Do you ever come across a theory idea that is so crazy that if true, it would have some pretty big ramifications and could even change the show as a whole? I'm sure many of you watching remember the big reveal in Senior Years, and some recent events in RWBY and Star vs. the Force of Evil could also go under this category. On my Discord server, which you should join by the way by clicking the link in the description, one member mentioned something so interesting that I just had to cover it. At the core is this question that asks, what if the title of the show, The Dragon Prince, wasn't just referring to one character, but two? Yes, my lovely viewers, what if Callum was part, wait for it, dragon? Okay, I'm pretty sure you're going to immediately write this statement off as a crack theory and call me crazy, but surprisingly, by looking at some potential outside influences of the show, as well as some statements from the creators, I am able to say quite a bit about this. If you're an active member of the Dragon Prince fandom, you probably know about one of the most popular headcanons/theories, and that is the idea that Calum is part elf. If you have seen the show, which you probably should have if you're watching this video, you'll know that we have yet to see Calum's biological father. We have barely even gotten a mention of him in the show. All we really know is that he is dead. After season 1, we also learned that he was a different race than Sarai because Calum is biracial. Of course, this is not the same thing as being a hybrid of two species, but I'll get back to all that later. Additionally, Viren called Calum a mongrel in season 1.
You impudent little mongrel! You were spoiled and given everything!
This does happen to be an offensive term for someone of mixed descent, but I took it more as Viren not being happy that Calum was considered a prince despite being born to two non-royal parents. But who knows, maybe there could be more to that statement. And while Calum certainly does not look like it, fans really want Calum to be part elf, specifically a Skywing elf because Calum learned to do sky magic. It would give an explanation as to why he could learn magic relatively easily when apparently no human had done so before, and it would make for a cool reveal. I've always been a bit iffy on this theory. I love the fan art, don't get me wrong, but the impressions I've gotten from the creators about this theory have really made me doubt its validity. In an interview I did with them, where I asked their thoughts on the Calum elf headcanon before season 2 released, they kind of joked around with me, asking how his fingers would work if he was only half elf.
Do you guys, what's a weird one that you guys like?
A weird one?
Ooh.
Yeah.
I mean, I love any like Calum is an elf ones are pretty fun.
Yeah, those are great.
I like that one.
Would you be able to tell? Would he have like a half a finger somewhere? Would there be some sign of that?
Yeah, or
is it?
They're actually wood pinkies. Yeah, these like
little tiny bumps on his head, or one.
Additionally, the co-creator Aaron Ehasz promised that we would see Elf Calum in season 3, which since they're in Zadia means that Calum will need a disguise to blend in like Rayla did when she was in Catolis. This could be a compromise from the creators to say, hey, he's actually not part elf, but since you wanted it so bad, here he is. Kinda. I suppose that would be good foreshadowing for Calum actually being part elf, but I still have my doubts. And then we had this really curious response to a question about Elf Calum. At the Bagel Lord asked Aaron his take on the Skywing Elf Calum theory. Aaron replied that this would be a big spoiler either way, and they have clear ideas about who Calum's father was, why Sarai loved him, and how things ended between them. So this is a very different response from when I asked them a pretty similar question a few months before. But Aaron saying that Sarai had reasons to love him made me really intrigued. I'm sorry Aaron, I analyze your tweets too much for my own good. But with all this in mind, I began thinking of other possibilities. As mentioned from before, a user from my Discord server made a light go off in my head. Damien V suggested that Calum's father could be a dragon instead of an elf, and that got me super excited because I love dragons and he had evidence to back it up. So I'm just going to preface this by saying that I have absolutely no knowledge about Dungeons & Dragons, and everything I'm going to say about D&D is what Damien said to me. As you can see in his message, in D&D, older good-natured dragons can shapeshift into humanoid forms and can crossbreed with most species. Additionally, the default sorcerer archetype is a draconic sorcerer. These sorcerers get their powers from dragon blood. Here's what the player's handbook says about this type of sorcerer. Your innate magic comes from draconic magic that was mingled with your blood or that of your ancestors. Most often, sorcerers with this origin trace their descendant back to a mighty sorcerer of ancient times who made a bargain with a dragon, or who might have even claimed a dragon parent. Some of these bloodlines are well established in the world, but most are obscure. Any given sorcerer could be the first of a new bloodline as a result of a pact or some other exceptional circumstance. So this means that it was very possible that one of Calum's ancestors was a dragon, or they made a deal with the dragon, and they therefore got dragon blood and can now do magic. I do think a deal with a dragon is more likely, but if his father was a shape-shifting dragon, then Sarai would definitely have a reason to keep this a secret. As we saw in a flashback in Season 2, she considers all intelligent beings equals and was very much against killing the Magma Titan. It is very possible that she could become friends with a creature as dangerous and powerful as an adult dragon. Dragons hiding out in the 5 human kingdoms would be super cool after all. You might be wondering why I'm considering referencing D&D, but we do know that at least some of the creators had thought about what class each of the characters would be in, as this tweet from Giancarlo Volpe, one of the producers for at least the first season, shows. Of course, it's not exact, but D&D has definitely impacted fantasy stories as a whole, so it's bound to have some sort of influence on this show. Additionally, in D&D, older dragons can also talk. This aligns perfectly with the recent confirmation that the dragons in The Dragon Prince can also speak English when they get older. Them needing to be at least 75 years old to talk, with 75 being considered young, means that we likely won't be hearing Zim talk anytime soon. But for the older dragons, it means that they are extremely intelligent and much more than what we have seen of them so far. Which means it is possible to bargain with a dragon, or even communicate with one in general, except if you have whatever powers Ezran does. Now obviously in the show there is no precedence for dragons or any magical creatures to have these types of powers, especially when it comes to transformation. However, I did ask a question at WonderCon this year, inquiring about just how much each element can do. And it seems like the scope for each element is wider than I thought, meaning I wouldn't put it past one of them to allow for transformation abilities. For example, moon magic is all about life and death, which can mean a whole lot of things.
Is there only like really 1 or 2 main powers that go with each primal source, like with the moon is illusion? Is that basically what it is?
I think there's a range, there's an area, right? So we've always, moon magic connects to appearances, but it also is the magic of life and death. So eventually you might find darker explorations of moon magic that could connect to some spookier stuff.
Yeah. It's not as narrow as like 1 or 2 things. Like it's much more broad than that.
Now this is a lot of the information, but I'm not done with possible inspirations. What I'm about to bring up is definitely more of a long shot, but since I've recently watched all of it, I want to bring it up. And that show is none other than Merlin, which aired from 2008 to 2012. I'm about to lay down some major spoilers, so if you haven't finished the show or plan to watch it, skip to this timestamp. Anyways, for those of you that watched my very first interview with the creators of The Dragon Prince back before Season 1 aired, you may remember I actually asked about Merlin being an inspiration for Callum. Back then I basically just asked it because I saw a bunch of people asking that question, and they said that they really didn't know, and that would be a question to ask one of the character designers. Would you be able to, I've heard a couple people talk about this across the internet, but would you be able to share with me the inspirations for Prince Callum? I've seen some people compare his outfit to Merlin, and was that intentional?
Whoa. I mean, we could probably ask, so Caleb Thomas is one of the character designers that worked on our show in sort of the early stages to define the look. And he's known on social media as CT Chrysler. I highly recommend following him on Instagram because he's a phenomenal illustrator and designer. And, you know, we brought him in the early stages to design Calum as well as a lot of the kind of main cast. So I'm curious if it's possible he might have looked at some reference of that. You know, ideally, it's Calum is his own thing and not derivative of anything. But yeah, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? He does a lot of really deep research, so I would not be surprised if that popped up in there somewhere.
It sounds like how his brain works.
Yeah.
And back then I really hadn't seen the show, so I hadn't thought much of it. But now I've watched Merlin, and the similarities are striking. And just look at these two side by sides. They could be twins. Short brown hair with a red scarf thing. Also, the style of the jacket looks pretty similar. And not only all that, but they can both do magic, which probably gave people that knew about Merlin a bit of a hint for Callum's future powers. And this is now a bit of a tangent, but let's take this one step further. Arthur, the prince in the series, looks kinda like Soren. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and wears armor. And Morgana, a character who starts off as the king's ward, has black hair and green eyes, just like Claudia. And she later learns that she can do magic and eventually goes down a dark path. Combine this with all the people also comparing Claudia with Azula, and it's not looking pretty, at least for a while. Now here's where the huge spoiler warning comes in, so seriously don't watch this unless you want to be spoiled. It turns out that Arthur and Morgana are half-siblings. Same father, but different mothers. Now I'm not saying this is the case in The Dragon Prince, after all we already have one pair of half-siblings in the show. But until we see what Soren and Claudia's mom looks like, I'll always have this crack theory in the back of my head. Regardless, both pairs are siblings in some sense. The similarities are just too interesting to be ignored. At the very least, a Dragon Prince designer has seen Merlin, and knew Callum would eventually do magic, knew that Soren needed armor, and knew Claudia would need to do dark magic, and decided to base their designs off this older show. So the writing may not reflect the show Merlin, but at the very least the character design does. But anyways, back to some things I learned in Merlin that could get evidence for my theory. Wizards and dragons in the show Merlin are considered spiritual brothers, as they can both use magic. In particular, they are dragon lords, who can speak to and tame dragons. Additionally, older dragons can speak English, but just like with Zim, the young white dragon in Merlin was mute, likely due to being too young to learn English. And finally, it is Merlin's father that was able to use magic, which would obviously support this theory. Now of course my theory about Callum's father being the source of his dragon blood is hampered because Ezran is the one who has a connection with Zim. It is possible that Sarai was the one with the ancestral connection to a dragon, and therefore both of her sons got magical abilities. Ezran is connected to the Earth Arcanum and can speak to animals, and Callum is connected to the Sky One. However, I should note that the creators have said that Ezran's ability to communicate with animals comes from a deep sense of empathy and isn't magic. But I guess we have to wait to see if the show gives us any official follow-up about why Ezran is the way he is. So it's very much possible that Callum's father was a normal human, and it was Sarai who was the one to have magic in her veins. And the spoilers for Merlin are over. I suppose I just want Callum's father to have a connection to dragons because he is so mysterious at the moment. But that's all the evidence I have at this moment, but the ramifications of this would be very interesting. If Calum is half magical creature, it could represent that he is proof that a union between humans and magical creatures is possible. After all, it is very possible that the only one who could defeat Erebos is the one that can master all the elements and unite the two sides. Having dragons as allies would definitely be helpful. Or it's just possible that Callum's father was also a mage, meaning that Callum would have a natural affinity to doing magic. This would also align more with the Callum being biracial statement, which would still be true if he was half magical creature, but maybe a different term would be more appropriate to describe him then. Or maybe Callum's father was some other type of magical creature we have yet to meet. But either way, I hope we are in for a surprise when we finally learn more about Callum's father. Him being alive would be a surprise in itself, but maybe there was something more magical about him that intrigues Sarai. So with all that said, what do you think about this theory? Do you still think Calum is part elf? Or do you believe what the show said, that stated that Callum could do magic because he unlocked the Sky Arcanum because he worked hard enough for it and understood it in a way that no human had before? Or do you prefer the Dragon Callum theory now? Let me know in the comments below. This theory video was over 2,000 words long, so it was no easy feat to create. If you enjoyed these videos and want to help support me as I juggle all this plus school, feel free to become a patron. We have a few pretty cool tiers you can consider joining. For example, you could have gotten a sneak peek of this video before anyone else. And make sure to subscribe and give this video a like if you enjoyed it. I'm eagerly awaiting an announcement for the release date of Season 3, as I'm sure you all are. Additionally, Deep Cut is going to start making Dragon Prince videos soon, so make sure to get notifications for the channel to be the first to know when he uploads one. Enjoy this amazing Erebos end card animation made by Bubble Quail, and have an animated day.